racist manager deliberately creates a mess for the black cleaning lady, believing no one will take notice. However, he is left stunned when called into the CEO's office, only to find the cleaning lady sitting alongside the CEO. Vanessa stepped into the pristine lobby of Chambers Enterprises, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished marble floors. The office building's clean, minimalist design exuded an air of quiet efficiency, but she could still sense the eyes on her. People who passed by glanced quickly, their expressions indifferent, but touched with curiosity. New faces in a setting like this were rare, particularly in her position. Adjusting her apron, Vanessa inhaled deeply. The work itself wasn't what troubled her. She had been a cleaner for years and was no stranger to the way people reacted when they saw her with a mop or vacuum in hand. Today, though, there was more at stake. She had been personally briefed by Mr. Chambers himself. This assignment wasn't just about cleaning. She was here to observe, to watch closely, and to report back. A door clicked open down the hallway, and out stepped Derek Forrester, the company's middle manager. He was in his early 40s, sporting an expensive suit, his shirt collar open just enough to suggest a casual confidence. His broad smile felt almost too friendly as he approached Vanessa. "Ah, you must be the new cleaner," he said, extending his hand for a brief shake before pulling it back. "Vanessa, right? Welcome to the team. I'm Derek." Vanessa nodded, matching his smile. "That's right. Pleased to meet you." Derek's eyes slid over her, taking in her uniform and the cleaning tools at her side. "Well, Vanessa, we really appreciate what you're doing here. It's not an easy job, but I'm sure you'll find we run a pretty tight ship," he added, his gaze drifting down the hall. "Though I must admit, my office gets a bit messy sometimes. Long hours, lots of paperwork, but you'll keep things looking sharp, I'm sure." Vanessa's smile stayed in place. "I'll do my best. I'm sure you will," Derek replied, his tone shifting into something softer, almost patronizing. "And don't hesitate to ask if you need anything. After all, we're all part of the same team here with that." He gave her a small nod and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her standing in the immaculate lobby. She didn't need to hear more to understand what Derek really thought of her. His polite words and rehearsed friendliness carried the weight of something unspoken. In his eyes, she was here to clean up after him, and that was all she ever would be. Vanessa exhaled slowly, refocusing on the task at hand. There was work to be done, and it was important, not just for her paycheck, but for a bigger reason. She hadn't encountered many people like Bill Chambers, a man with both money and power, who was determined to expose the quiet bigotry simmering within his company. He had told her as much when they first met 2 days ago in his spacious, glass-walled office. "I need someone who can see what I can't," Bill had explained, his voice low and deliberate. "Derek's been with the company for years, and on the surface he's the model employee. But I've noticed things, subtle things, and I can't let that attitude fester here. I need to know if he is who he claims to be." Vanessa had agreed. Though she wasn't entirely sure what to expect, Bill had promised fair compensation, but more than that, he had appealed to her sense of right and wrong. She had seen enough discrimination to recognize it, even when it was cloaked in a smile. As she pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, her eyes scanned the office. For now, she would do her job, watching and waiting. Derek had already shown glimpses of his true self. All she needed to do was let him keep talking. Riding the elevator to the executive floors, Vanessa thought of her son back home. This job was her chance to provide a better life for him, to offer him opportunities she had never had growing up. But now, there was more at stake. Bill Chambers had given her the opportunity to be more than just a cleaner. He had given her the power to expose the truth, and she had no intention of wasting it. Over the next few days, Vanessa quickly settled into her routine. The work itself was straightforward, cleaning offices, wiping down desks, and emptying trash bins. But as Bill had instructed, she kept her ears and eyes open. Each interaction with Derek was another piece of the puzzle, and the pieces weren't hard to find. By midweek, Derek had grown noticeably more comfortable around her, and that's when the messes started. On Wednesday afternoon, Vanessa entered Derek's office to find his desk littered with half-eaten sandwiches, crumpled papers, and a coffee cup that had been knocked over, the dark liquid spreading into a stack of reports. His jacket was carelessly draped over the back of his chair, and crumbs were scattered across the floor. "Oh, hey Vanessa," Derek said without looking up from his computer as she wheeled in her cart. "Had a bit of a spill earlier. Could you take care of that? Thanks." Vanessa paused, surveying the mess. She glanced briefly at Derek, who was typing furiously, his attention entirely fixed on his screen as if she didn't exist. With a quiet sigh, she grabbed a cloth and began wiping up the spilled coffee, carefully avoiding the soaked papers. "Sorry about the mess," Derek added, his tone casual and dismissive, still not looking up. "Work's been crazy this week. You know how it is." "Of course," Vanessa murmured, her voice calm as she continued cleaning without a word of complaint. But inside, she could feel the weight of his indifference. He didn't care that she was cleaning up after him. In fact, it seemed like he took pleasure in knowing someone was always there to handle his mess. As she worked, Derek's phone buzzed, and he picked it up, turning slightly in his chair to glance at her. "You know, it's great having someone around to keep things in order. I mean, no offense, but most people wouldn't do half as good a job as you," he remarked, his tone casual but with an edge of something unspoken. Vanessa briefly met his gaze before returning to her task. She didn't need to respond. His words hung in the air, heavy with a quiet sense of superiority. Derek turned back to his screen, apparently satisfied with himself, while Vanessa finished her work in silence. It was clear to her now, Derek's messes were deliberate. He would leave his trash, spill his drinks, and never once acknowledge the work she did to clean up after him. Each time, he'd throw in a casual comment, as if to remind her of her place. Inside, Vanessa was in a constant state of analysis, dissecting every word and glance that Derek directed her way. She could sense his slipping confidence, and she was ready to catch him when he finally fell. That afternoon, as soon as Derek left for a late meeting, Vanessa made her way to Bill Chambers' office on the executive floor. She had grown accustomed to slipping into his office unnoticed. Their meetings remained hidden from the rest of the staff. Bill was seated at his desk when she entered, his suit jacket draped casually over his chair, eyes glued to his computer screen. He didn't look up as she quietly closed the door behind her. "How's it going?" Bill asked without turning away from the screen, his voice low and even. He clicked something on his screen and finally leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. Yet, Vanessa could sense the keen interest behind his eyes. Vanessa took a seat across from him and pulled out her phone, scrolling through the pictures she had taken of Derek's increasingly messy office. "It's getting worse," she said, handing the phone to Bill. "It's like he's testing me. Every day he makes a bigger mess, and the comments are becoming more pointed." Bill took the phone, scanning the photos with a slow nod as he examined each image, coffee stains on his desk, wrappers discarded on the floor, crumbs scattered across the carpet. "He's getting comfortable," Bill said quietly. "That's good. It means he's not trying to hide anymore." Vanessa replied, her voice steady yet sharp. "He doesn't see me as anything but the cleaner. He thinks that's all I'll ever be, and he's growing bolder. The way he talks to me now is pushing it, just waiting for me to react." "Have you?" Bill asked, locking his eyes with hers. "No." Vanessa shook her head. "I've kept it professional, but he knows I'm getting frustrated. I think that's exactly what he wants. He's waiting for me to slip up." Bill nodded thoughtfully. "That's how it works. People like Derek don't show their hand right away. They push little by little until they feel safe enough to reveal their true thoughts. By then, it's too late for them to cover it up." Vanessa folded her arms across her chest as she leaned back in her chair. So what's next? How much longer do we wait? Bill leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. We wait until he reveals enough that there's no way for him to explain it away. When he says something that truly crosses the line, we'll have everything we need. Vanessa nodded, though part of her bristled at the idea of waiting. She had already heard enough from Derek to understand the kind of man he was. But Bill was right. If they wanted to ensure Derek couldn't worm his way out of this, they needed undeniable proof. That meant allowing Derek to think he was in control, even when he wasn't. "I'm documenting everything," Vanessa said, tapping her phone to show Bill the detailed log she had been keeping. "Pictures, notes, it's all here." Bill's eyes flicked back to the screen, nodding his approval. "Good. Keep doing what you're doing. He's going to make a mistake soon, I can feel it." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "He's going to slip, Bill, and when he does, I want to be there to see it." Bill's smile was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Oh, you will be, trust me." As Vanessa left Bill's office, her mind was racing. She knew the breaking point was nearing. Derek's messes were becoming more frequent, and his comments were less guarded. He was beginning to feel untouchable, as if he could say or do anything without facing challenges. But that was about to change. The following day, Derek's behavior escalated even further. When Vanessa entered his office in the late afternoon, she found the usual scene. His desk covered in food wrappers, a half-eaten sandwich precariously perched on the edge, and crumbs scattered across the floor. However, this time, there was more. A cup of coffee had spilled on the carpet, its dark stains soaking into the fibers. A surge of frustration rose in her chest, but she maintained a neutral expression as she wheeled her cart into the room. "Vanessa, you're a lifesaver," Derek said without bothering to look up from his computer. "I swear, I don't know what I'd do without you." Vanessa began cleaning in silence, her movements methodical, but her mind raced. How long was she expected to tolerate this? She could feel Derek's eyes on her, watching her from behind his screen. He was waiting for her to react, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Sorry about the mess," Derek said casually, pushing his chair back and standing up. "It's been one of those weeks. You know how it is." Vanessa paused, glancing at the pile of trash on his desk. "You could try cleaning up after yourself," she said, her voice calm but firm. She hadn't meant to say it, it just slipped out. Derek froze, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at her. The smile faded from his face, replaced by something sharper, colder. "That's your job, isn't it?" he replied, his tone light yet edged with contempt. "I mean, what would you do if I didn't leave anything for you to clean up?" Vanessa met his gaze, her face unreadable. "I'd still do my job," she said quietly. "But that doesn't mean you should go out of your way to make things harder." Derek laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Well, don't take it personally, Vanessa. I'm sure you're used to this sort of thing." He turned away before she could respond, leaving her standing there, her hand gripping the vacuum handle. Vanessa clenched her jaw but said nothing. She wouldn't take the bait. Derek was becoming reckless, pushing further each day. But Vanessa knew the truth. His downfall was inevitable. All she had to do was wait for the moment he finally crossed the line, and she wouldn't have to wait much longer. By the end of the week, Derek's careless messes and patronizing remarks had become the norm. Each day brought a new level of disrespect. Crumpled papers thrown haphazardly on the floor, half-finished meals left to rot on his desk, and the ever-present coffee spills that seemed more intentional than accidental. The tension was building, not just in the air but within herself. The weight of holding back and enduring Derek's casual cruelty was becoming harder to bear. On Friday afternoon, Vanessa entered Derek's office and immediately noticed the state of disarray. It was worse than usual. Empty takeout containers littered his desk. A greasy pizza box lay open with crumbs scattered across the floor, a half-eaten sandwich precariously perched on the edge of his desk, and a full cup of coffee had been knocked over, dark liquid slowly spreading across the floor. Derek was sitting at his desk, leaning back in his chair with his feet propped up casually as he scrolled through his phone. He didn't even acknowledge her as she entered, though the smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth told Vanessa that he was aware of her presence. He was waiting for her to clean up as always, but this time, something snapped inside her. Vanessa halted in her tracks, the handle of the cleaning cart still in her grip. She stared at the mess for a long moment before looking up at Derek. He was too relaxed, and it only fueled the fire that had been quietly burning inside her all week. "Derek," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you need to stop leaving your office like this." Derek's eyes flicked up from his phone, his smirk deepening into a full grin. "What's that?" he asked, his tone light and dismissive. Vanessa stood her ground. "I'm asking you to clean up after yourself," she said, the tension in her voice rising. "I come in here every day, and it's like you're deliberately making a mess just because you know I'll clean it." Derek chuckled, shaking his head as he put his phone down on the desk. "Vanessa, come on," he said, still leaning back in his chair. "Don't get so worked up. I'm sure you've cleaned up worse in your time." Vanessa clenched her jaw. She had been expecting this, his attempt to laugh it off, to belittle her, but she wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. "I'm not asking for much," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Just a little respect. It's not hard to clean up after yourself." Derek's smile faded, his eyes narrowing as he straightened in his chair. "Respect?" he repeated, his tone sharp. "You think you're owed respect because you clean up a few spills and pick up some trash? Let me remind you of something, Vanessa. This is your job. You should be grateful you have it." Vanessa stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't flinch, she didn't break eye contact. "I'm doing my job," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "But that doesn't mean you get to treat me like I'm beneath you." Derek's expression darkened, frustration bubbling over. He leaned forward, the casual demeanor replaced by anger. "You think you're special because you're the cleaner? Newsflash, you're not. You're just someone who picks up after people like me." Vanessa could feel her heart racing, but she remained composed, her voice steady as she responded. "I'm not beneath you, Derek. I'm not your servant. You might want to remember that before you say something you can't take back." The tension hung heavy in the air, both of them standing their ground as the silence stretched. Derek's anger was palpable, his face flushed as he struggled to contain it. Finally, he leaned back, his demeanor shifting back to casual as if nothing had happened. "Fine, whatever. Just clean up, will you?" Vanessa took a deep breath, her pulse still racing, but she forced herself to nod, pushing the cart further into the room. She wouldn't let him win. As she began to clean, she felt a sense of clarity. It was time to put everything she had documented to good use. Once she was done, Vanessa would have her evidence. She would take it to Bill and show him exactly what kind of person Derek was, how far he was willing to push her, how casually he treated her. Derek, clearly rattled, didn't say anything. He stood there seething, watching as Vanessa worked in silence. A few minutes later, just as she finished wiping down the last of the spilled coffee, Bill's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Derek, can I see you in my office for a moment?" Derek's head snapped toward the door, his expression shifting from anger to sudden alarm. He hadn't realized Bill was nearby. Vanessa didn't look up, but she could sense the shift in Derek's energy. He was nervous now, unsure of what Bill had heard. Sure," Derek stammered, smoothing down his shirt in an attempt to regain composure. He shot Vanessa a final glare before heading toward Bill's office, leaving her alone with the remnants of his mess. As the door to Bill's office closed behind him, Vanessa allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Derek had finally crossed the line, and there was no going back. The game was over, and Vanessa knew that when the truth finally came out, she would be standing tall. Inside Bill's office, Derek stepped in with a carefully composed expression, though Vanessa could tell from his hurried steps that he was rattled. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, she stood silently in the hallway, her heart pounding but her mind clear. This was the moment Bill had been waiting for. She had done her part. Now it was up to Bill to finish what they had started. Bill sat behind his large, polished desk, his demeanor calm and collected as always. He looked up as Derek entered, gesturing for him to take a seat. Derek hesitated for a moment before sitting down, his posture tense and his hands resting awkwardly on his knees. "Derek," Bill said, leaning back in his chair, "I just overheard a conversation between you and Vanessa." Derek's face remained carefully neutral, but Vanessa noticed the way his fingers twitched slightly. "Oh, just a little misunderstanding, Bill," he said with a nervous laugh. "You know how it is with the staff. Sometimes things get misinterpreted." Bill's eyes narrowed slightly, though his tone remained even. "Misunderstood? You raised your voice, Derek." It wasn't hard to hear. Derek forced another laugh, this one sounding even more strained. "Well, I didn't mean anything by it. Vanessa's just a bit sensitive, you know." Bill didn't respond immediately. He let the silence linger between them, his gaze never leaving Derek's face. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence clearly faltering. The quiet tension in the room was palpable. "Derek," Bill said finally, his voice measured, "I've known you for a long time. You've been a valuable member of this company, but I need to know the truth. What exactly did you say to her?" Derek swallowed, his eyes darting away from Bill's steady gaze for a brief moment before he plastered on a smile. "Like I said, it was just a misunderstanding. I might have been a bit frustrated, but it wasn't anything serious. Just a little workplace banter, that's all." Bill's expression remained unreadable as he studied Derek. "Workplace banter?" he repeated, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Derek fidget. Derek nodded quickly. "Yes, that's all it was. You know how things can get tense around here sometimes. I didn't mean any harm." Bill leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk, his eyes locking with Derek's. "I thought I heard you say, that's all your kind is good for. Is that workplace banter?" Derek's face paled for a moment. He didn't seem to know how to respond, shifting in his seat, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. Finally, he let out a nervous chuckle. "Bill, come on. You know me, that's not how I meant it. How did you mean it then?" Bill's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it now. "Because it sounded pretty clear to me." Derek's smile faltered completely. He glanced around the office as if searching for an escape route, but there was none. Bill's gaze was unrelenting, and the silence between them stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. I don't know what you want me to say," Derek stammered, his voice shaky now. "It was just a bad moment, okay? I was frustrated. I didn't mean to say it like that. Frustration doesn't excuse racism, Derek." Derek's face flushed with a mix of panic and anger. "I'm not a racist," he blurted out, his voice rising defensively. "I've worked with people of all backgrounds my entire career. I treat everyone the same." Bill raised an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. "Do you?" Derek sputtered, his mind racing as he tried to backtrack. "Look, Bill, you've known me for years. You know I don't have a problem with anyone. This is all just a misunderstanding." Bill didn't reply immediately. He let Derek's words hang in the air as though weighing them carefully. Finally, he stood up from his desk, walking slowly around to where Derek sat. He leaned against the edge of the desk, his arms still crossed. "I'm giving you a chance, Derek," Bill said quietly. "A chance to come clean about what happened. I don't want excuses, and I don't want lies. I want the truth." Derek looked up at Bill, his face pale and hands trembling slightly. For a moment, it seemed like he might confess. His mouth opened as if to say something, but then he closed it again, his eyes flicking toward the door where Vanessa waited. He shook his head. "There's nothing to come clean about," Derek said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was just a bad moment." Bill's expression hardened. He pushed away from the desk, pacing slowly behind his chair. "All right, Derek. I'm going to take you at your word for now." Derek's shoulders sagged in relief, a small, shaky smile returning to his lips. "Thanks, Bill. I knew you'd understand. It's been a stressful week, that's all." Bill didn't respond. He walked to the window, his back to Derek, staring out over the city skyline. "But understand this," Bill said, his voice cold and distant. "I expect the people in my company to treat everyone with respect. And if I find out otherwise, there will be consequences." Derek nodded quickly, still rattled, but visibly relieved that the confrontation seemed to be over. "Of course, Bill. Absolutely. I completely understand." Bill turned back to face Derek, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "You're dismissed for now, Derek. But remember what I said." Derek stood, practically stumbling over his own feet in his haste to leave the office. "Absolutely, Bill. I'll make sure there are no more misunderstandings." As Derek hurried out of the room, Bill remained standing by the window, his expression unreadable. The moment the door closed behind Derek, Bill let out a quiet sigh and walked back to his desk. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the polished wood, his mind already turning to what would come next. Vanessa stood just outside in the hallway, her heart still pounding from what she had overheard. She didn't move or speak as Derek stormed past her, his face red with embarrassment and anger. He didn't even glance at her. The game wasn't over yet, but Vanessa knew that Bill was playing a longer game, and Derek had no idea that the final move was already in play. Vanessa arrived at the office early the next morning, her routine unchanged on the surface, but the air was different, tense. She could feel the weight of what was about to happen. Derek, oblivious as ever, sat in his office, likely assuming the worst had passed. He had no idea what was coming. Her steps were measured as she pushed her cart down the hallway. The office was quieter than usual, but she noticed a few employees glancing her way. No one said anything, but Vanessa could sense the curiosity lingering in their eyes. She kept her face neutral. Today was not about her performance, but about setting the stage for the moment that was about to unfold. When she entered Derek's office, the familiar scene of chaos greeted her. Coffee stains, papers scattered across the desk, a half-eaten sandwich precariously sitting on the corner, crumbs littering the carpet. It was as if nothing had changed for him. He still believed she was there to clean up his messes, literally and figuratively. "Morning, Vanessa," Derek greeted her without looking up from his computer. He typed furiously, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Made a bit of a mess again. Can you take care of it? Thanks." Vanessa paused, looking around the room. She noticed the crumbs under the desk, the spilled coffee near his chair. The more she cleaned for him, the more careless he became. She wasn't surprised, but today she wouldn't just walk away quietly. Today was different. She knelt down to clean the crumbs, and as she did, Derek's phone rang. She heard his casual tone switch to forced politeness in an instant. "Hey, Bill." Derek answered the phone, his voice now artificially bright. "What's up?" Vanessa slowed her movements, listening carefully as she continued wiping the floor. Bill's voice was low, but Vanessa could hear every word clearly from across the room. "I need you to come to my office and bring Vanessa with you." There was a brief pause, and Derek's forced politeness wavered. He glanced toward Vanessa, confusion flashing across his face. "Vanessa," he repeated, his voice stiffening. "That's right. Now," Bill said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then, with a decisive click, the call ended. Derek's eyes flicked toward Vanessa again, his expression tightening. He gave her a thin smile, though clear discomfort lurked behind it. "Looks like the boss wants to see us both," he said, trying to keep his tone light, but it came off strained. Vanessa didn't respond. She simply stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and nodded. "Let's go." They walked down the hallway together. Derek stepped slower than usual. He seemed unsure of what to make of Bill's request. His usual confidence had taken a hit, though he hadn't realized the full extent of what was happening. Vanessa kept her face passive, her heart pounding quietly in her chest but outwardly calm. She had waited for this moment, and now it was here. When they reached Bill's office, the door was already open. Bill sat behind his large mahogany desk, his demeanor calm and controlled. His office was pristine, not a single paper out of place, with sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere hanging in the air. "Come in," Bill said, gesturing for both of them to take a seat. Vanessa walked in first and sat down, her hands resting on her lap. Derek followed, though his movements were noticeably less confident. He tried to mask it with his usual air of professionalism, but it was clear that something had shaken him. "Bill, I wasn't expecting," Derek began, but Bill raised a hand, cutting him off. "Sit down, Derek," Bill said, his voice calm but firm. Derek's eyes widened slightly, but he did as he was told, sitting in the chair across from Bill. He glanced at Vanessa, confusion clouding his expression, but she remained silent. "I called you both here today," Bill began, leaning back in his chair, "because there's something we need to discuss, something that has been happening under my nose for far too long. And I'm afraid, Derek, you're at the center of it." Derek blinked, clearly taken aback. "Bill, what are you talking about?" "If this is about yesterday's little misunderstanding with Vanessa—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Bill interrupted, his voice sharper now. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. "It was an incident of disrespect, of racism, and I've let you think you could get away with it for far too long." The color drained from Derek's face. "Racism? Bill, come on. That's not what happened. Vanessa and I had a disagreement, sure, but you know me. You know I'm not." "I know what I heard," Bill said, his voice hard and cutting. "I overheard everything yesterday, and Vanessa has been documenting your behavior all week." Derek's eyes flicked toward Vanessa again, panic beginning to creep into his expression. "What, you had her spying on me?" Bill didn't flinch. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, flipping it open in front of him. "Vanessa has been keeping a detailed record of everything you've said and done, every mess you've left, every condescending remark. She documented it all." He slid the folder across the desk toward Derek, who hesitated before grabbing it. As Derek flipped through the pages, Vanessa could see the realization dawn on his face. His eyes scanned the photographs of his office in various states of disarray, the notes Vanessa had taken, the detailed accounts of his casual, dismissive remarks. This is taken out of context," Derek stammered, slamming the folder shut. "Bill, you can't take this seriously. Vanessa's exaggerating, twisting things around. We were just having a bit of workplace banter." "Banter?" Bill repeated, his voice dripping with cold disdain. "Telling someone that they should be grateful for their job because it's all they're good for. That's your idea of banter?" Derek's face flushed with anger. "I didn't mean it like that, and you know it. Bill, you've known me for years. I've worked my ass off for this company. You're going to fire me over this? Over some cleaner complaints?" Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Derek, but she remained silent. She wasn't surprised by his reaction. He had always thought of her as nothing more than the cleaner. Even now, he couldn't see the truth. "I'm firing you," Bill said, standing up from his desk, his eyes blazing with anger now, "because you've disrespected this company. You've disrespected the people who work here, and you've proven that you're not the kind of person I want representing us." Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You're throwing me away because of her." He gestured toward Vanessa, his voice rising with desperation. "You're going to ruin my career over some misunderstanding?" Bill didn't back down. He walked around the desk, standing directly in front of Derek. "This isn't about Vanessa," he said coldly. "This is about you and the fact that you've shown your true colors. Derek, you can't talk your way out of this." Derek's face contorted with fury. "You'll regret this," he spat. "I've given everything to this company, and now you're throwing me away over nothing." Bill crossed his arms, his expression unmoved. "Get your things, Derek. Security will escort you out." For a moment, Derek stood there, fists clenched at his sides, his face red with anger. He looked between Bill and Vanessa, as if hoping one of them would back down, but neither did. He was finished, and he knew it. With a final glare, Derek turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The room was silent for a moment after he left. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her hands resting on her lap, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. It was over. Bill turned to Vanessa, his expression softening. "Thank you, Vanessa," he said quietly. "I know this wasn't easy, but you did the right thing." Vanessa nodded, meeting his gaze. It needed to be done. Bill walked back to his desk, sitting down with a sigh. "I'm sorry it took this long to address. I should have seen it sooner." "It's not your fault," Vanessa replied. "People like Derek are good at hiding who they really are until they slip." Bill leaned forward, his elbows resting on his desk. "You've done a great service to this company, Vanessa, and to yourself. You've shown us what kind of person Derek really is, and you've shown me the kind of person I want to keep around." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I want to promote you," he said, his voice steady. "I want you to take on a leadership role here. You know this company, and you understand our values. We need more people like you." Vanessa blinked, stunned. "A leadership role? Me?" "Absolutely," Bill affirmed. "You deserve it, and you have my support. This isn't just about the cleaning staff. It's about building a company culture where everyone feels respected and valued." Vanessa took a deep breath, emotions swirling within her. "Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that more than you know." Bill nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Let's discuss what the next steps will be. You've earned this opportunity, and I believe you'll do great things here." As they began to talk about the future, Vanessa felt a sense of hope washing over her. She had faced down Derek and come out on the other side stronger. She had fought for respect, and in doing so, she had not only changed her own life, but had a chance to change the lives of those around her as well. Derek slammed the lid of the box shut, his knuckles white as he gripped the edges. His mouth opened as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. For the first time, he looked genuinely speechless, as if he finally grasped that there was no way to talk his way out of this. Vanessa stepped back from the doorway, giving him space. "This isn't just about what happened between you and me," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "This is about how you treat people. Maybe one day you'll understand that. Maybe you won't." Derek's shoulders slumped slightly as he let out a bitter laugh that sounded hollow. "So what now?" he muttered, almost to himself. "You think I'm going to walk out of here and just disappear?" Vanessa shrugged. "That's up to you. You can learn from this, or you can stay angry. But either way, you won't be able to treat people like that anymore, not here." Derek said nothing, his face tight with resentment. He grabbed the box from the desk and turned away, his back to her as he gathered the last of his belongings. It was clear he had nothing left to say, and Vanessa wasn't interested in prolonging the conversation. She watched him for a moment before turning to leave, walking back down the hallway with the same steady steps she had come with. As she rounded the corner, she heard the distant sound of Derek's office door slamming shut behind her. It wasn't a sound of victory. Vanessa didn't need that. For her, the victory had already been won. She had stood her ground, exposed the truth, and claimed her respect. Whatever Derek chose to do next was his burden to carry. As she moved through the office, Past the whispers and curious glances, Vanessa felt a sense of finality settle over her. Derek was gone, and so was the weight he had imposed on her. She had endured his cruelty and condescension, but now she was free of it. As she continued her work, moving from office to office, she realized that she had done more than just clean up after Derek. She had cleansed the toxicity he had left behind. In the following days, the office felt different after Derek's departure. The heaviness that had lingered in the air for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of calm and quiet progress. People moved about the office with newfound ease, their footsteps light, their interactions respectful. Though Vanessa still made her rounds with her cleaning cart, she could feel that her role in this place had changed. Later that afternoon, Bill Chambers asked to see her. There was something final in his tone, suggesting this meeting would be different from their previous ones. Vanessa had spent much of the day contemplating what was next. Bill had made her an unexpected offer, and she had taken her time to consider it carefully. As she approached the executive floor, the familiar sight of Bill's office came into view. His door was open, as it often was when he expected her. Bill sat behind his desk, his usual calm and controlled demeanor in place, but today there was a warmth in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Vanessa, please come in," Bill said as she stepped into the room. Vanessa walked in and took a seat across from him, her hands resting comfortably in her lap, while her mind sorted through the decision she had made. Bill looked at her with quiet curiosity, waiting for her to speak. "I've been thinking about your offer," Vanessa began, meeting his gaze. "I appreciate it more than you know. It's not every day someone in my position gets the chance to move up in the company, but I also know that this place hasn't always been easy for me." Bill nodded, listening intently. "I understand what you've been through here, especially with Derek. It wasn't right, and I can't blame you if you want to start fresh somewhere else." Vanessa considered his words carefully. She had thought about leaving, about starting over in a place where no one knew her, where she could redefine herself from the ground up. But then she thought about what she had accomplished here, how she had stood up for herself, how she had claimed her dignity in the face of adversity. She had earned her respect in this place, and maybe, just maybe, there was more she could do here. "I've worked hard to get to this point," Vanessa said, her voice steady. "I think there's more I can do, more I want to do. You've given me an opportunity, Bill, and I've decided to accept your offer." Bill's face broke into a genuine smile, the warmth in his eyes unmistakable. "I'm glad to hear that, Vanessa. You've shown incredible strength, and I know you'll do great things in this new role." Vanessa smiled back, feeling a sense of relief and confidence settle over her. "I've been through a lot here, but I've learned that I'm capable of more than I thought. If I'm going to help change things, if I'm going to make sure people like Derek can't treat others like that, I think this is the place where I can do it." Bill nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why I wanted you for this position. You've seen firsthand what needs to change, and you're the kind of person who won't back down when something needs fixing. I believe in you." "Thank you," Vanessa said sincerely. "I won't let you down." Bill stood up and extended his hand. Vanessa rose and shook it, her grip firm and steady. The moment felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, one where she would no longer be in the background, no longer overlooked. "Let's get started then," Bill said with a smile. "I'll have HR prepare everything, and we can talk more about your new responsibilities tomorrow. But for now, I hope you take the evening to enjoy this moment. You've earned it." Vanessa nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I will, thank you." As she left Bill's office and walked through the hallways with a sense of purpose, Vanessa felt something she hadn't felt in a while: hope. This place had been difficult, but it had also been a space where she had grown, where she had discovered her strength. Now, with a new role ahead of her, she knew she could make a real difference. When she stepped into the elevator and watched the floors disappear behind her, Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. She had fought hard to get here, And now she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't just the cleaner anymore. She was a leader, someone who had earned her place in this company. The elevator doors opened, and Vanessa stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. The city stretched out before her, full of new possibilities. This time, she would face those possibilities not as someone who quietly endured, but as someone who had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her future. As she walked down the bustling streets, Vanessa knew one thing for sure: she was ready. Ready to lead, ready to make her mark, and ready to show everyone that she was more than they had ever expected. This was just the beginning.